I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. My guests today are Amy Hoy and Alex Hillman. Alex is a founder of amazing co-working space called Indie Hall in Philadelphia, and Amy is an incredible developer, and she's running her own really powerful bootstrap business, and together they've actually built a really interesting training experience for entrepreneurs. So awesome to hang out with you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, super excited to be here.
My pleasure. So Alex is, you started this thing, 2006-ish, Indie Hall?
Yeah.
Giant co-working space, like creative, cultural hub of the entrepreneurial space in Philadelphia. And really kind of like before the whole co-working thing even was a thing.
Yeah, there was really only a handful of people doing things that they were calling co-working in the entire world.
Yeah. So what was the reason for you? I mean,
I was lonely. I had gone out on my own. I left a job to go pursue being a freelancer as a web developer, and freedom and flexibility was awesome, choosing who I was working with and what I was working on. But it was hard to find other people to either work with or to be inspired by. I had the companies that I had worked for previously. I worked with a bunch of just tremendous people. It felt like a family. And, when you work with great people, it's not just that you add to each other's work, you push each other, you learn things. And I missed that. Meanwhile, I didn't really want to start an agency. So Indie Hall started as solving that problem of how do I surround myself with people who inspire me that I can inspire back. And when I asked, how do I do that? I looked in Philadelphia and said, I'm not the only one who wants this or needs this. But for the entire first year, there was no physical space. The goal wasn't even really a physical space. It was, let's make the community in Philadelphia better for Philadelphia's sake. And eventually the club wanted a clubhouse, and that's where the co-working space part really launched.
So where were you, like in temporary space or just meeting at cafes?
So National wasn't open yet, was it?
That's right, yeah. So one of our local watering holes, National Mechanics, which is a bar that's owned by a web development company.
In like a former mechanics union building that looks like a church.
That's wild.
And
or a bank.
Their booths are actually pews from the church. It's really
columns, stained glass.
It's so cool.
It's crazy.
That was one of the last places that we would do co-working days before we ended up signing a lease on our first space. But when you work from home and you sort of get that burnout, or when's the last time I talked to people? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
When did I put on pants last? I'm not really sure. And so a lot of people go to the cafe or they go to a Panera or something like that just to get out and go out into the world and see people.
But they're still alone.
There's warm bodies, but there's no context.
Right.
And so when you meet people who are also doing that, hey, do you ever work from a cafe? And they say, sometimes. They go, well, we should work from the same cafe sometime. And really that group grew. Yeah. The other thing we do is, there were some meetups going on. The meetup culture in major cities was not really huge in 2006, but there were some meetups to go to, some events to go to, and even just going to other people's events together was a little bit better than going alone.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because entrepreneurship, on the one hand, it's really exciting, it's all consuming, it's immersive, you're creating stuff. Whether you're sort of doing your own thing as a freelancer or whether you're trying to build your own thing. I think to maybe people outside of the world, it's a little counterintuitive that it can be insanely lonely at the same time.
Yeah. They have the fantasy image from movies and whatnot. It's never if they're alone in their basement, then there's something really wrong with them.
Yeah.
And that's the different kind of movie than that successful entrepreneur who's doing something interesting that other people can understand. That person usually has tons of creative friends who come over and in the movies and hang out and they bounce things off. But that doesn't,
despite the cameras,
we don't
live in a movie usually.
No.
Sometimes we wonder, but
no. But it's that's not the image people have. If that's people's images of it are informed by media, unless they know a bunch of people who are actually doing it.
Right.
Now, if you're next to people who are doing it, then you know that their lives are different than what people commonly consider to be the way that they are.
Yeah, and it's just a radically different experience. And I'm somebody who's bounced between brick and mortar entrepreneurship, where I've owned space with retail and service and stuff like that, to somebody who's largely sort of knowledge working these days.
Yeah.
And even that, for me, was massive withdrawal. Because one day I owned a yoga center in New York. I opened the door. I've got my community, my tribe there, and then I sell a company. Then I'm at home, still talking to people on Twitter and social media.
Yeah, it's different though.
Totally different, and it's not like we have to be creating the same thing together, but sort of it's almost like parallel play.
Well, there's that. There's also, I think there's a in like getting work done, I need the people around me. I want to trust them. And even if I'm not working with them, the people around me I want to trust. And then depending on how my business grows or things that I want to do, having that foundation of trust. I mean, Amy and I were friends for years before we actually started working
He's
together.
not talking about not going to steal my laptop trust.
Yeah, I'm talking
it's
about...
It's more of a deeper interpersonal trust.
Like, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I understand you. I've gotten to know you. I know you more than the stuff you show on the surface because we've had a meaningful conversation about our interests, about our passions, about our families, our lives, our stories. One of the neat things about working at Indie Hall is we work really hard to bring those kinds of things to the surface and help people get to know each other on that personal level long before there's ever a transaction to be had.
Yeah.
Sort of change the order of operations. Because once I know what you do, the odds of us talking about anything other than what you do goes way, way down. Versus I find out that, we had this thing in common. We both, collected comic books growing up, or we still read comic books.
Magic the Gathering.
Talk I
was listening to while I was putting on my makeup.
Stuff like that.
I played Magic too.
It's so interesting. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they live in Paris right now. And they're saying, like, if you go up to somebody in France and the first question out of your mouth is what you do, it is considered a highly offensive question to ask somebody. They're like, it's just not. So I wonder if it's really like largely an American cultural phenomenon type thing that we first make like a beeline to like, what do you do? And let's build around that rather than like, who are you? Like, why would I care about like getting to know you beyond that?
Having lived in Austria, no, I don't think anyone ever asked me.
That's right. I totally forgot. Right.
I think, it varies city to city too. Like, I look at like New York versus Philadelphia, where we both live. New York is a city where you need to keep doing business in order to stay alive. So there's a speed of transaction that if you're not hitting that clip, you're in trouble. And Philadelphia affords a quality of life. Literally a quality of life.
It literally affords.
Oh, literally affords. Yes, that's true. So there's the cost side of it, but also there's a pace that's different. And you can stand still for a few minutes and you're not going to get eaten alive.
It's cheap there, actually. I would go so far as to say very inexpensive.
But again, even aside from the cost side of it, I feel like I do my best work when I have some room to think and pause. And when the culture supports that, when the culture not just supports but reinforces and reminds you, it helps everybody do better work.
Yeah, which is interesting too because there are like two cultures happening simultaneously in both cities. There's the city culture, but then there's the entrepreneurial culture within that city. Do you find that the entrepreneurial culture, like between New York and Philly, is really different?
There's different groups of entrepreneurial culture. It's the damn video.
It's always the video.
Did you see the video?
No.
There's like the how to pronounce videos that are really how to pronounce things, and then there's one that makes fun of them, but it looks picture perfect, and it's entrepreneurship. Eeny, peeny, teeny shrimp.
Eeny, teeny, peeny shrimp.
It's so good.
It's spot
but
on.
It'll ruin the word entrepreneurship for you.
Forever.
Yeah, okay.
Just talk about starting stuff.
Different entrepreneurial communities in both of the cities. Because I don't mean from Philly to New York, but inside Philly, there's multiple different communities. Like there's Indie Hall, which is not, it's not like that all of Philadelphia is like Indie Hall in terms of its entrepreneurial ambitions. There's definitely our Midtown. There's definitely people who wear power suits, and there's tall towers, and there's people who talk about, why do we not have enough venture capital in Philadelphia, and people who want to get more venture capital in Philadelphia, and like the startup type, like startup people, and there's like people like us. There's like a lot of differences even within Philly, and I think that's true in New York as well.
Yeah. Which actually is like a great segue into how I stumbled upon you in the first place. It was a couple of years ago, and I'm like killing time scanning the front page of Hacker News, and this like phrase pops out at me. I'm like, must find out more entreporn.
Oh yes.
And I'm like, that was my first exposure to your work, and then I started like
that is just basically top to bottom accurate.
The best way in.
Right, exactly. So I start reading and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. So, we haven't really talked about your background a whole lot. Like a crazy smart developer, you've got a number of products, bootstrapping savant, and somebody who's just really interested in the process of building companies that is not the whole VC backed. So tell me about entreporn.
Okay. So entreporn is, well, dial it back.
Okay.
What is pornography? I think that if you look at it from a psychological standpoint, it's no less about specifically sex necessarily, but things that you use to manipulate your own feelings. So it's like, I consider World of Warcraft to be pretty pornographic. It gives you the hit of feeling like
I don't like where my brain takes that.
Oh, it probably is that as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so let's pretend I didn't say that. It's unrealistic. It gives you a feeling of having done something or achieved something or being able to understand something or just that sort of emotional hit without actually being real. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything against pornography. Like, no, I don't. But if that's all you consume, it doesn't make a very healthy person. So entrepreneur is specifically what I call these like crazy outside stories of overnight success, but also the negative ones, talking about how, we struggled and ate ramen and had all this horrible stress and it was so depressing and so hard. Like that post from the Fab guy.
Right, yeah.
Yesterday or a couple days ago, this week, I don't know. It was like, it's a fucking startup. We're here to build. Of course it's hard. Rah! And so it's just like, it is top, like he is emotionally manipulating himself, right? He's fooling himself and he's trying to fool people along with that. And it doesn't have to be that way, but some people they like that narrative. They like the feeling that, it's something so hugely important and so difficult and that makes them feel good about themselves in sort of weird self-punishing way and does kind of skeeve me out a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, more than skeeves you out because you've written a lot of that. You have really strong opinions. But I mean, I think the whole concept was that when I read it, I was like, okay, so especially the entrepreneurial media.
Yeah.
Now I'm struggling with the word entrepreneur. I was like, right.
You said it right.
So the media tends to focus like on the big wins and the big falls, and it's like in everything is like so. It's like the vast majority of what you see being covered in some sort of meaningful way.
It's
like all
Cosmo.
The big crazy stories. But so the entrepreneur, it's the stuff that catches your eye and stuff that like
salacious.
Right. But that's 99% of the people who are out there building stuff. That's not their story. And it's almost like you wonder whether featuring that, as the focus for media all over the place, like, is that actually doing damage?
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's what sells. So it's like the lowest common denominator, like sex sells metaphorically as well as, literally.
But when people start making decisions, whether it's quit my job, whether it's take money from someone who I don't know what taking that money means hiring people, like building a company at any scale is going to affect more than just you.
Right.
And when you've got this particular fantasy informing your decision making the wrong decision, even if it doesn't actually negatively affect you, can and will negatively affect other people.
Yeah, somebody. But it usually will negatively affect you and the people around you first. You cannot base your real life on a fantasy. But for most people, that's all that they've been exposed to.
Right. And which is, I had a friend of mine who wrote a book a couple of years back, called The Entrepreneur's Equation or something like that. Maybe it was something different. But it was basically like, are you sure you even want to be an entrepreneur? Like, do you actually understand the reality of it? And what's interesting is that it was from one perspective also. And I think what's emerged from you, is sort of like this backlash of exalting bootstrapping. Yeah. It's like bootstrapping. It's like the famous line in the Facebook, like in the movie, right? Like, what was it where like, Justin Timberlake's character, goes like, do you want to own, like a laundromat or, change the world? And it's like, owning like the small business that does good work and makes a difference and lets you live a good life. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only is it okay, but people need those. They need them a lot more than jelly. Ooh, it's an app for asking your friends questions. I believe that's called a mouth.
Yeah.
Crazy thought, or a number of other extremely well-funded, useless things. Laundromat delivers way more value to the community.
So tell me about the idea of bootstrapping, because, so it starts with you kind of like getting really bothered with the whole world of entrepreneur. And then, but you guys have now collaborated, I guess, for probably a couple of years now, right?
Yeah, like
about 3.5, 4 years.
To create a training program, which basically says, okay, like we all hear about the MBAs, we hear about going out and raising VC and doing all the big things and going for like the big hockey stick moment. But you know, there's a need that's not being served out there, which is like, how do you actually teach bootstrapping? Because you want that to be supported.
So that's a great question. It's actually been hard to teach people. The thing is, the whole reason the class exists is because, along with my husband, I was building a small software business, Freckle, and we worked on that part-time for a year before I decided I just couldn't consult anymore. They were driving me crazy. And we had shipped and sold an ebook, and like over the past several years, it's like $90,000 worth of ebook sales. And that was JavaScript performance ebook. So it's like, you know, as niche as you can get.
Right.
And the people that I knew from the, you know, the development community, the Ruby on Rails community, I mean, like I got to know really early a lot of people who are now really huge, famous names in the industry. And some of them did great, you know, succeeded well at their like huge outsized ambitions, and others flopped and flopped and flopped because they didn't seem to understand from my perspective what the fundamentals of business were. So if they were consultants, they didn't know why the clients hired them. And that didn't translate into a successful software product for them, because you have to understand, why do people buy things? How do you make something that people want?
Right.
And I would tell people, my friends, one-on-one, like, well, what kind of salary do you need? Why do you think you need to go get venture capital for this, that, or the other? Because you're giving up a lot of power if you do that. What kind of money do you need to live on comfortably? And then we'll like do some math out of the taxes. And like, we'll look at it. If you can find 500 customers across the entire world who will pay you $30 a month, that's $180,000 of gross revenue in a year. So you take your taxes, and that's a really good living. There's not a whole lot of places, especially at that time, where you could get more than that as a salary. And you could have a much more flexible life. And people's eyes would like pop out of their heads, like they didn't know how to do math. Like they had never thought, how much money do I want to be able to do what I want? How much do I need? And how many customers, at what price points does that break down to on a regular basis? They've never done that incredibly, incredibly simple planning at all. And hence the name of the class, 30 by 500.
So it's
30
times, right.
It is literally a mathematical formula. And they didn't. So I started realizing that they had no clue whatsoever. And meanwhile, I was a super nerd as a kid and read all these business books. And I, you know, sold bootleg CDs when I was 12 and sold all my Little Ponies in order to help fund a new computer when I was 13. I had a huge yard sale.
You eBayed IKEA stuff.
I did. When I was a teenager, so I left home pretty early and I needed money. So I actually found that people were paying a lot of money for IKEA lamps on eBay. Because this was before they had the catalog where you could order from. So you could look at the catalog, but you couldn't buy things from
places where there was no IKEA.
No IKEA.
Right.
Back in the 90s. And so I created listings, and I had this software tool that would help me manage my listings. And then it was a just-in-time system. So when the auction would end and it was at a profit, I would go buy the lamp and ship it. And I would pick out which lamps you could actually ship in their own boxes and which ones versus the ones you had to package up and stuff like that. And I made a good $500 to $1,000 a month just on that.
Right. That's amazing. So you're a hustler on the entrepreneurial side.
I'm a hustler, yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, how do I just make this happen? Like you see opportunities and gaps and needs that need to be filled.
Exactly.
And which is, I mean,
that's the opposite of way most people try to do it. They're like, well, I have this thing now, how do I sell it? I wasn't like, gee, how do I sell IKEA lamps? I noticed that other people were making money selling lamps.
Right.
I knew how much they actually cost. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get in on that.
I think that's one of the big myths. I think that's one of the big things that happens once you sort of like step up to that. We're going to call it the next level of entrepreneurship, even though I don't really know if it's above, you know, in terms of the rung, in terms of satisfaction. But, you know, almost anything that gets funded, it's a product that gets funded. You know, and they say we're buying into the team, but fundamentally, like the team is presenting an idea that gets funded rather than saying, there's a market.
Right.
You know, and this is one of the things, like, you know, Scott Belsky started Behance.
Not personally, but know of him, yeah.
So one of the things I loved about what Scott did was that from the very beginning, their mission was to serve the creative community. They were product agnostic and mission driven. And that was from the beginning that Scott was like, this is the way that we need to be. So first we want to find out what the problem is with the community. And then so then they come up with the action guides, but they weren't the action guide company. It was just one product that happened to fill a particular need. And they were just constantly like going back to the community, like, what do you guys need now?
Right.
You know, and, what's interesting is I think, that's so intuitive to so many people, but it also means that you really need to dial into who you want to serve to a certain extent first.
Absolutely.
And people struggle with that in a huge way.
That's exactly what we teach people to do. You say it's intuitive for a lot of people. I don't think so.
No, I say it's counter. I think people struggle.
Okay.
Yeah, people struggle fiercely with that.
This is my mishearing things for fun and profit thing. Yeah, I think people struggle a lot with it. Because how many like, oh, yay, entrepreneurial stories have you read or movies have you seen where someone was like, just gonna watch people for a while and figure out what their problems are? Like, that's just not the story.
It's also not a particularly fun story to watch.
It's not a fun story.
Right. So it's like, oh, big idea, I had the product.
Right. So the big idea, right? That's the idea of a genius moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And we sort of find ourselves having to beat the idea of genius
Out of people,
which is, that's a part of the outward communication about what we do is like, look, you not only don't have to be a genius, but if you think you're a genius, it's working against you.
Right.
If you come to the table with an idea, right? If you come to the table with an idea and you're walking around tapping people on the shoulder with your idea wand going, do you like my idea? Do you like my idea? Do you like my idea? You could do that to the end of time until you're blue in the face and you might find somebody, but you also might not.
Right.
So,
or people will say, I like it, and they're lying because they're just trying to be nice.
Right.
That happens.
So
a lot.
So one of the, like, again, sort of going back to the psychology of it, it's like the idea that the idea comes from inside of me is genius. That the idea is an internal focus versus going out there. The idea is not in you. The idea is out there.
Right. Yeah.
In the community. Like
no ideas, but in things.
Right.
Carlos Williams.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I recently, I've been kind of fascinated with Charles and Ray Eames for years. And I finally just got around to watching a documentary not too long ago about them.
Is this the artist and the painter? Or the architect and the painter?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And what's sort of fascinating about them is like when you looked at their, like their workshop in Venice, it wasn't like, they didn't position themselves as like, we are the furniture designers. People hired them to design, like splints for soldiers after the war, furniture. They made movies. They did this. They did like a million different things.
They were problem solvers.
Right. And what they got hired for was their process. It was
absolutely.
people learned to trust the fact that they would be able to go from zero to figuring out something really cool in a way that a lot of other people couldn't. And they would just go out there and look and say, okay, like what do we need to do here to make this work? And just try a ton of different things. But it's fundamentally problem driven. Yeah. And that's, I think, it's missing so much, because I think also there's so much ego attachment to the big idea.
It's a fantasy again.
Right.
It's like I think a lot of movies that are, have you going, yeah, cheering in your seat, or, at least inside, you are putting yourself in the main character's position. And so you're kind of feeling their accomplishments. And I think people don't want to separate that feeling from like the hard work of actually doing what really works. I think sometimes people prioritize the feeling over actually getting the results.
There's also an accountability factor to it. Like, the longer it's coming from inside of me, the easier it is for me to point blame to other places.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we're super sort of philosophizing on.
Yeah, this is the ego and id show.
I was like, whoa, I think you sound really douchebaggy to say that. I'm going to dial it back. Between grasping and denial, there is the middle way.
So,
the class is so much more practical.
Right.
Let's go back to entrepreneur.
And here are the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. So you guys at one point, you get kind of like annoyed, and you're friends for like years before this, and you're kind of like bouncing ideas. And then you decide to come together to like join forces to see if you can solve this problem and start to teach people, okay, there's another way to go about this. How does that conversation go?
Well, Amy had already done a conference call, which was basically pay a few $100 to listen to me talk about, was what, $100? Yeah. $100 to listen to me talk about all the things I had to figure out over the last year and change, 2 years and change of building and growing Freckle. And people were rabid for it. And so I was visiting her and Thomas in Vienna And she
over
was
New
like,
Year's, like a
over
month
New Year's,
later.
yeah. And she was like, I did this thing. It was really amazing. And the number one feedback is people want more. So we should do this together.
So you're validating the entire thing by doing that also.
Basically, yeah. But I knew I didn't. We don't like the word validating because that is focusing on saying, "Here's my idea, and I'm going to validate it." And I feel like even just the word validating assumes a positive result. Mm-hmm. I like testing better if you're going to talk about it that way. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So, but what I did was I knew that people had this problem. Absolutely knew it because I read Hacker News. I read some, Reddit startups and all that stuff. I watched my friends fail and fail again. The question is, could I convince them that this was a problem that they could fix?
Right.
And that I was the one to help them. And that absolutely worked. And it was like nothing for me to do a 2-3 hour conference call and tell stories and then do Q&A. It was very little preparation. And
but then the next step was us literally, there's a photo of us, Post-it notes on the dining room wall. What are all of the reasons that people fail at starting a bootstrapping company or don't even, that they fail to try? Like they fail to start. What are the reasons that they're afraid to do it? What are the things that they worry about? Basically everything leading up to launch.
we did a card sorting exercise.
Yeah. And started categorizing it and going, okay, this is the stuff that we need to figure out how to tackle and help other people tackle.
Did you think that convincing people that bootstrapping was worth doing would be one of the big challenges? Or at that point were you just like, people get it now? Like,
no, they didn't get it. But I didn't think it was going to be hard. I thought it was obvious.
Right.
Wrong.
So talk to me more about that.
So, I, coming from this background where I was, like you said, a hustler, and I had to be, and then I ran my consulting business that way. I thought it was just, this is how why take venture capital if you can make the money yourself and keep the control? I thought that was just totally obvious.
Yeah.
I'm just innately distrustful of people bearing gifts that just sound too good to be true, which I think a lot of venture capital is. And so I just thought that was a thing that people understood. And it turns out there's actually still tons of pushback. This was 2010, early 2010. 2014, finally, things are becoming an option people discuss more. But if you look at like the bootstrapping contingent inside Hacker News, it's like tiny. Right. Especially since they banned me.
One.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious also, like within Indie Hall, what's the vibe around bootstrapping versus like trying to land money?
Yeah. So, it's interesting to see where the majority of people at Indie Hall are coming from. A lot of them are people who have already left a job to be independent and freelance, and them finding home at Indie Hall is a choice of like preservation of that independence. So the idea of taking money from somebody, I may as well go back and get a job and work for somebody else again. Right. So people are seeking the transition from trading time for money to creating long-term value through product businesses and things like that. And ultimately, in our case, also working together to do that. But I don't think there's a lot of people in the room who would use the word bootstrapping. Right. But the mindset of bootstrappers is the prevalent one within our community there for sure.
Agreed. And I thought that was more like a Philadelphia thing until I got some exposure to like the wider community in Philly. And I was like, nope, it's an Indie Hall thing. And you hit the nail on the head, right? It's what is your end goal? If it's independence and control and, being able to completely define your own future, then bootstrapping is the logical choice.
Right.
But a lot of people, I think, in the startup community today still think they want to do a startup, but they haven't really figured out why.
Right.
Right.
They're just kind of following a path.
And for them, it's step 1, choose to do a startup. Step 2, go raise money.
Right.
They never chose between venture capital and bootstrapping.
There was no choice at all. Yeah.
Yeah. They would never consider bootstrapping.
And also seems like, like step 3 for a lot of them is like, I have no interest in actually running a business. It's like, I want to be a startup person, and go startup. And also having been through a lot of different businesses just on my own and pretty much bootstrapping, there's a lot of not fun stuff that comes along with, made it past year 2, and now I have to grow this methodically and brutally and grind out systems and processes that people have zero interest in. And it's like, what if you actually build something which is doing okay, but you can sell it? And you have to stay in it and then build it slowly, and you want nothing to do with that. But it's interesting that Indie Hall has that ethic, because my sense is that a a lot of co-working spaces that are growing up today, that's not the vibe inside.
Yeah, no, you're totally.
You should hear Alex complain every single day about the emails he gets about other co-working spaces.
But co-working spaces make the same mistake.
Not that they're bad. It's just totally different.
Like, they're shooting themselves in the foot, though.
Yeah, it's the venture capital model. It's you create a shell of a certain size, and now you've got to like pedal like crazy to fill that shell.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's this.
Or else the axe comes down.
You invent an expectation. That expectation wasn't there until somebody gave you a check.
Right.
You've invented a certain scale expectation that now you're required to fill. And when people open co-working spaces, by opening a space and then going, okay, now I need to fill it, it's the exact same thing in a physical realm, right?
Think about that.
So, I think there's a bunch of lessons that can be learned there that could probably be brought back to the, venture versus bootstrap. Not even that they're even a versus, but at the opposite ends of the spectrum, where once you open the space, it's an empty space. And if I wanted to work in an empty space, I would stay at home. So there's this for free in my underwear still.
Right.
So there's that cold start problem of like, I've created a solution in search of a problem. Right. The other thing is that makes you make really different decisions.
Oh, totally.
I call it it's the equivalent to when you go grocery shopping when you're hungry, you buy a bunch of junk food. And you shouldn't buy the junk food, but you take it home and you eat it anyway.
Or you eat it in the parking lot.
Or you
buy two. Yeah. One for the parking lot, one to say, hey, I brought something home.
Right.
You plan ahead.
Right. So yeah, if you make junk food decisions about your business, about building your community, and in community building, it's all about, like, the community is the aggregate of the people that are in the room. Right. And if the people in the room are junk food equivalent, they're there for themselves and not for each other.
Yeah.
Where do you think the community is going to be as it grows? Who is it going to attract? Is it going to attract a bunch more self-serving people who are only in it for themselves and to rent a desk? And as soon as they're done needing a desk or done getting whatever it is they want out of the other person in the room, they bounce. Now you've got high turnover. I had a New York Times journalist ask me, and this was like 2.5, 3 years ago, what do you guys do to stay afloat being such a high turnover business? I said, why do you think we're a high turnover business? And she said, well, your memberships are all month to month. I said, yeah, that means it's my job to make people want to be here. Right? So I think that
it's not a high turnover.
It's not. Most of our members, once they join, have been there
Indie Hall is not a high turnover business.
Are most co-working spaces high turnover?
Yes, absolutely. So, but it's because they open a room, fill it with anybody who will come in the room, and then as soon as the person's done using the desk, if you're selling a desk, the second someone's done using the desk, they leave. They cancel the membership. But when people join Indie Hall because they want to be part of the community, sometimes they know they want a desk, but they're interested in the community. They discover the community. They become part of the community. They no longer need the desk, but the community has become an important part of their life. Right. Their business.
Yeah. I'm a good example of that. Yeah. We moved out of Indie Hall because we grew our team. It was just too big. And so we have an office around the corner, but we're all members and we hang out in Indie Hall all the time.
Right. So, you're still very much part of the community. It's just physical space and limitations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we pay a membership fee for that. It's $300 a month. So we help support the things that we like to do there.
Yeah. So there's, I came out of health and fitness business on the entrepreneurial side. And there's, the gym model is like, you build a 30,000 square foot box and then you do a massive pre-sale campaign and try and put as many people in it so you get enough monthly memberships to pay. And then that, you're providing a service that for the most part people aren't really served by and they quit and you have to replace 40% of your membership every year. Yeah. And spend $1 gazillion on marketing. Great model, right?
What you just said is exactly what 95% of the co-working spaces in the world are doing.
And also, if you think about it, the vast majority of social marketplace on all those startups, they build a shell and then they try to fill it with people, but the people don't want to go.
Yeah. And it's like, it's funny because people will then look at the 5% that do that and then succeed and they're like, see, it's possible. Yeah. And I have to, coming completely clean. Like I've done that and I've gotten partly just really lucky and been in the 5% where we put money in, we opened a nice place and people came and it worked. But moving forward, then I look at there's a really big disruptor in New York City in the fitness space right now called SoulCycle. And they're fundamentally a spinning studio, which has been around for 20 years or 25 years now. And every gym in the city offers spinning classes. And they're like, we're going to do it differently. But it was started by two women who were moms who moved here, couldn't find something that they wanted. So they rented like a hole in a wall location, you know, and set up bikes and just started like scrapping it together, bootstrapped the whole thing. People started to come, packed to the gills, and they grew it and grew it and grew it and grew it. And the interesting thing about like the monthly thing you were talking about is, you know, most health clubs try and lock into like a year contract or something like that, or, you know, you buy like a 10 pass or this or that. The thing about Soul Cycles, there's no long-term commitment. Like they don't take it. You pay generally per class or for a small number of classes. It's really high. You'll pay more per class than anywhere else on the planet. And they have a system where like every Monday at noon, they open up reservations for bikes for all the classes for the weekend, like by 12:05. Like the bikes are all gone.
That's like the DMV in Philadelphia.
Right. Maybe they got it from the TMB, right?
Yeah.
But so, but the thing is, like by doing it that way and pricing it that way, they like the burden is on them. Like you were saying, it's like their job is to consistently keep creating experience, which is so extraordinary.
Their rewards with the customers' rewards.
Like they have to keep giving just something incredible. Well, and they have exploded because they're not complacent and they're not, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. I'm definitely not in the desk rental business. I'm in the happiness business.
Nah,
everyone that is a member of Indie Hall, whether they come in and use the physical space or not. And at this point, over 70% of our members almost never use the space. So that's how, and that's not that because we don't want them to. It's because they can get the value out of it without having to walk.
Yeah, just on the cultural connection.
That's by design. That's totally by design. So, you know, our competition is not even another co-working space. It's someone who doesn't know about a co-working space at all. It's the person who's still sitting at home in their underwear, typing away at a laptop for free. I have to get them to take a shower, hopefully put on pants, leave the house, come in and pay money for the alternative and love it so much that they want to pay a monthly fee and come back. And tell their friends.
And it's an open plan office, which everyone is shitting on these days.
Right. Right. So like you've got everyone really, like if they don't want to be there, their membership, they're going to cancel. You know that. And the other part about it is, you know, I think one of the interesting differences between 30 by 500 in many ways and Indie Hall, in 30 by 500, it's largely us delivering the value to the students. Whereas with...
At first. Until the alumni group stuff.
Yeah, the alumni group really things take off. But that's...
So, and also just to make clear for those watching and listening, you know, 35 by 500 is the name of the training that
the
you
training
teach.
class.
Yes. Never name anything with a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, it's impossible to say out loud.
30 by 500. Or if you're European, 500 by 30. Just kidding. That won't come up in Google.
That's true. Indie Hall is a business built around a community. It's not a business grafted onto a community. It's not a community grafted onto a business. They are one and the same. If the community is growing and healthy, the business is growing and healthy. Because the majority of the value that a community member gets is not from me or any of my staff members. It's from each other.
Yeah.
That's the magical thing I think about communities. And when you approach a business that's got a community as the core value that you're selling, if you don't think about it that way, you're missing out on the biggest opportunity that you have.
I so agree. I mean, the book that I'm working on right now is actually all about belonging. And what's so fascinating is like there seem to be a bazillion opportunities to find ways and places and things to belong to these days. A lot of it is digital also. And yet people are walking around feeling lonely, you know, more than ever. And so it's interesting. And I think a huge miss for business right now is this lack of understanding that, if you go beyond providing, you know, like knowledge and providing a product, but understand that actually like probably the single highest demand product is finding a way to actually connect people and create that sense of shared whatever it is, you know, and there are all sorts of different elements, you know, that might build it in different communities, but create that sense of belonging, that creating that container. You don't have to be the one that fills the container, just like creating the ethic in the container and then kind of like lightly shepherding, who enters into that community and that container. There's massive value in that. And people will stand up and say, yeah, I mean, people are paying you largely for that.
Yep.
You know, and I think there's a huge miss for a lot of people is
I don't think
not
Alex
valuing
really
that.
created the container though.
But without him, it wouldn't exist.
I think there was
an initial catalyst, but I think to riff on what Amy's saying, it's not so much that we created a container, it's that we we noticed a pattern and said,
Yeah.
we have this in common.
Right.
And it's often, like, a lot of times people try and force people into a container instead of recognizing, hey, we're all already in the same container.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference.
I think the way you described it sounded like what you're talking about, like building a space or whatever and hoping that people fill it. Right. I know that's not what you actually meant.
That's not what I mean.
The word container sounds like it.
Yeah, container, I don't even mean the space in any way. It's just the notion of, like, let's find a way for us too.
So I think that when it comes to community, but also bootstrapping or product business, and the reason that Alex and I work together on this class, the reason I asked Alex, even though he doesn't have a bootstrap product business at all, actually, is because there's so many parallels to building a sustainable community like Indie Hall, which now has 10,000 square feet and
hundreds of members.
Of members. And it's not like it's the cheap part of town. Right. It's a lot of liability, like financial and legal. And so to make that in a safe way is very much like building a bootstrapped business. Like SoulCycle did it as well. They started small. I don't think it's about creating a container in the way that I interpret the word container, or a space, and even I think it's more about inviting people to meet you or to meet each other. But it's not just, hey, come to my party, because you can go to a million parties and not actually have a sense of community, even if it's all the same people. Right. It's doing things together. It's that kind of like daily friction from spending time with people that you build that trust. You don't have a long talk with somebody once and then you trust them. Right. I mean, you might trust them to a degree, but you don't have that deep, I know I can always count on that person trust that you develop. You have to have like this daily contact or regular contact, little bits here, little bits there, where they slowly reveal their character to each other. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
That's hard to turn into a business, I think.
Yeah. I think in the same way that when people think about creating a business for the first time, they look at other businesses as the finished product or the current product. The product as they are and go, that's what I'm building. And go, actually, no, you need to rewind the clock to when you started and say, that's what I'm building.
It looks very different.
First tiny little thing. And when people talk to me about building community, they're thinking about the end result. They're thinking about either a room full of people or an event packed with people milling around. And I go, no. You need to think about the next conversation you have with one person.
Right, right.
And have that conversation in a different way.
Right.
In a curious way, where you're learning about them, where you're finding out about them. And the thing you're digging for is a reason to bring another person into the conversation. And the second person. Once you've got two people, then you've got the seed for a third person. And it's literally, we one of the terms that we use in 30 by 500 is stacking the bricks.
Stacking the bricks.
And that is a relevant concept for community building and for bootstrapping businesses. Absolutely.
Yeah. When you start with one brick, one person, one bit of content that helps people, one insight that people need something. And you cannot go from one brick to a wall right away. In the metaphor. I mean, you can call it Mason in real life, but you have to make one brick at a time and stack them together. And eventually you can build a very large building. But if you just set out to build a building right away, you're going to fail and it's going to fall over. Yeah. And that applies to an awful lot of stuff in life. Yeah, no,
I completely agree. It's so interesting. We do part of Good Life Project, like on the educational side of what we do. We run these programs. We've been running them 3 years now, where we kind of bring together a small group of people around a sense of shared values and aspirations. And what I thought we were doing in the beginning was, I'm like, okay, I think we're solving 3 problems. One is just knowledge, like fundamentals of how, like, it's a different approach, but just like basic bootstrapping concepts.
Yeah.
In a very generalized, and then, accountability, and then community, like people who kind of like believe what I believe and are parallel playing, and we're all kind of in this together. And I was like, the knowledge and accountability are the big things, and community, it's kind of down here, but we'll throw it in. Oh my God, I couldn't have been more wrong. Yeah. Right? And what we saw was, like in the first year we did, we're like, okay, knowledge is good, right? But fundamentally, if somebody really wanted to dig deep down and read a ton of books and take you can find knowledge.
Yes.
Like you can figure that out at somebody. Take work, but you can figure that out. Accountability, you can figure that. But like developing those relationships and sort of like finding that community where it's like, over time, like we're going to go deeper with each other and deeper with each other, and we believe similar things. the thing that, I mean, what we saw happen when those relationships start to form, like the magic that started to happen, the unlock in people's lives, like not just what they were trying to build, but just every area was mind blowing. It really took me by surprise the first time, even though like I was an idiot because I had built, you know, like a large yoga center around this exact thing. I mean, fundamentally, that's like, it's all the community, right? You know?
I think we've all had major moments where we forgot, like,
and you're like,
so obvious that we learned the hard way.
Right. I'm like, of course, like that's what this is really all about. And what's funny now is we kind of shifted the marketing within future years to really make it really clear, like one of the biggest things that's going to come out of this is the sense of enduring connection and community moving forward.
This is after your workshop, class, coaching.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think if you could go back in time and, you know, split and try something different, then if you tried to just build a community, that it wouldn't have worked.
Right. And I totally agree.
This daily exposure to people, not like we're going to form a community together.
Right.
It was totally natural. And so they learned a bit about each other here and there during the coaching sessions and lessons and, you know, by email. And that became the community.
And I have to imagine not everyone that went through the training became an active participant and member of the entrepreneur.
Yeah, and people are going to engage in all sorts of different ways because people are there for different reasons.
Exactly.
You know, and they're gonna but what I think I can probably say and feel pretty comfortable with that is that the people that engaged, that really connected, that like, you know, leaned into the community, are the people who have consistently gotten the most out of the experience. The people who sat there and said, okay,
totally.
This matters. Like, this is what this is really about. And we've actually, in our marketing, we've shifted things to tell people, like, this is what this is all about. We're going to give you all the other stuff. But like, if you ignore this, you're missing out on something which is so integral to your ability to get what you want out of it. Like, and I think some people kind of they're like, yeah, we know, it's part of it, whatever.
Yeah.
And then but they realize, I think now, especially because we've built so much emphasis around encouraging and creating mechanisms, you know, like how do you ask those questions in a way where you don't, like, you know, if you're an introvert, like how do you just really creating powerful series of mechanisms to allow people to keep having those conversations and deepen the connection, even if you're not comfortable at first, because it's just so important. It's such a big part of what you get out of it. He's taking a breath
to tell you a word of tumbling.
Yes, it's true.
Okay.
But let me interrupt you for a second.
Go for it.
Rock it.
We'll come back to tumbling.
So the other day, someone was like, so it's like a marriage. I was like, yeah.
Neither of our significant others are jealous, thankfully.
No, they're great. So, actually, to contravene the tumbling. So, one, I would love to see what you're doing. Two, we have found the same thing in 30 by 500. So the old 30 by 500 was an email course. There would be a lesson every week. Yeah. There would be homework exercises, and we would discuss stuff on the mailing list and have a weekly chat. You would think that that would be great at building a community, and it wasn't. Actually, people would disappear as the class went on. Because the work, I mean, it's not really easy. So one of the main things that we teach is something called Sales Safari. So a lot of startup methodologies have you doing customer interviews. Right. So for example, if I thought I wanted to sell stuff to yoga centers, software to yoga centers maybe, and you were still running your yoga studio, I would call you up and say, hi, can I have 20 minutes of your time just to talk about the problems you have in your business, and then hope that you would give it to me straight. But, you know, if you talk to a lot of people, interview a lot of people, you know that the way you ask questions changes things, and people are they're not going to think of the biggest problems that they have. Things are going to be like stuck in the back of their mind because you asked the question.
And they're not going to tell you either.
Right. Even if they are really motivated to be 100% honest with you, it's not going to work out. You're not going to get good data.
Right. Will tell, won't tell, can't tell.
Right. Or they're just going to be trying to be nice and be like, yeah, that sounds like something I would totally buy. But they might even believe it at the time.
They might even give you money at the time.
Right. But it's not really a good way to build a business. So what we teach instead is to observe what people are saying when you're not actively asking them questions. And what do they do when they're not like doing it to help you? So
it's the difference between going to see animals in the zoo and going to see animals
in the wild.
On safari.
Yeah.
It's still a lion, but the lion's going to act differently in the zoo than it does when you're out in the
Yeah,
desert.
totally.
So we teach our students how to read forum threads and blog posts and see what's popular and Amazon reviews and listen
So
at
funny. I do the
meetups.
same thing with Amazon reviews.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like so much
Right?
information.
There's
Yeah.
so much great information. People are not saying it for you. They're saying it for themselves.
Right.
And so that it's more of a pure source of information. And it's also, honestly, I think more respectful is to understand how someone is before you approach them rather than just tell me how you are so I can serve you.
Right.
And so that people they would not get that. And so they would be alone thinking they didn't get it, even though we would say in the lessons, this is hard. You're not going to get it. Talk to us. They would just slowly disappear.
And they would get behind and they feel guilty.
Right. Yeah.
And they would just stop.
Yeah.
And they'd disappear. So there were always a handful of people who would do great and they would keep going through it. And when they would have problems, they would post the mailing list or talk to us and say, I'm having a problem. And we're like, we'll help you with this problem. Anyone could have done it, but only a handful did. Like you said, the people who really get into it.
Right.
So what we did was we changed the class. We threw out everything except the concepts and made it a live 2-day boot camp. We pre-recorded the lessons so that we didn't have to deliver them live because it's very tiring.
Right.
And this way we could edit them.
And also consistent, not a second wasted. It's
Right,
100.
yeah.
Like these are the densest videos
Yeah.
that we could possibly produce.
Information dense,
Yeah,
not savant dense.
Right.
that's true.
So then,
And then the live exercises between the videos.
right.
So people are there. It increased the rate of people doing the same basic exercises that we had in the old class. It increased it to basically 100% of people in the class would do the exercise. And then we would review people's work, which in public, like we'd pick 2 people and review their work, which we did before as well on the mailing list.
Right.
But because they were all hanging together, they got such a much richer experience out of it.
So is there a way to facilitate sort of like conversation within the people that are there over that 2-day window? Or?
So we have for people who upgrade the class for the 4 weeks of follow-on exercises, which is similar to the old class.
Right.
But they've already built the momentum. They've already gotten
They've
over
already-
the majority
They
of
already
the
know each
foundation.
other.
Right. And that's
It's like they
huge-
went
that's
through
it's a game changer at
A
that
major
point.
experience together. So even though they didn't actually get to cross-chat very much during the class at all, because we're like, go, 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 go.
Yeah.
They've seen each other's work. They've, seen each other's questions. And they have that sense of being in it together, even though they don't really know the other person at that point.
There's also, I think,
Which is
when
fun to watch.
when you pay a good amount of money to learn something, until you're actively doing it, you're really just interested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so, this sort of the 2 styles and sort of models of communities of interest, communities of practice. I think our goal was for 3,500 to always be a community of practice,
Right.
but we never did a good job prior to this redesign of helping get people through the community of interest actually have enough of the skill to start practicing it, because it's through the practice, us actually doing the things together at the same time, that those relationships are being built that people can then carry forward. And at that point, that people start, some people are getting it faster. They're having more results.
Sure.
And that's where sort of that natural spread of, I get a little ahead, but I can then reach back and help my friend
Yeah.
and say, hey, let me help you out a little bit. And that effect in the new exercise program follow-on has been, again, that's the stuff that we wanted to happen in the old class.
Right.
And was really, really tough to get out of people.
Yeah. It's so interesting sort of like develop. I mean, I've not had to, but I've had the opportunity to start to go a lot more, down sort of like the program design rabbit hole, and then integrating it with the idea of community as a really essential element of that, which a lot of program design really doesn't talk about.
No.
You actually turned me on to a great book, Make Learning Whole.
That's a great book.
Yeah,
Really,
thank you so much for that. By the way,
very
that was
welcome.
awesome.
You're going to love Kathy Sierra's book. It's coming out.
Really, I don't even know
So
about it.
good.
It's creating badass users, I think.
Cool.
You're going to love it.
All right, cool. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that you can do that just, you can just keep redesigning and testing and getting feedback.
Yeah.
But even so, like a lot of stuff that's talks about community building is not written in the same vein as program design. So it's like to create this integrated program design that brings, education into community and understands that like there's really powerful cross value. You have to make a lot of this up as you go along.
It's true. So it's funny. I have a friend who actually,
true.
a friend I'm going to spend some time with this afternoon is a learning researcher. She has a degree from Harvard in learning research. She works for an organization called P2PU. And they do these community learning programs for open source foundations and so on and so forth.
She's great.
She's awesome and one of the smartest people I know in the learning design space. And we had this back and forth one day about learning communities. And I sort of realized, I was like, isn't that kind of like, I can't imagine a community where people aren't learning. Like all communities are learning communities. If people aren't learning, I can't imagine it actually qualifying as a community. Whether it's we're learning a particular tactic or skill or simply learning about each other, like the exchange of knowledge is a core fundamental piece of community existing. Which I think is a really, that's another sort of just a different lens to look at it through.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a fascinating one. I'm trying to think about like whether I know of any substantial communities where that's not a core part of it. And even the ones that would like pop into my head at first, I'm like, okay, but if you take it a level deeper,
right,
there is some level
like
of discovery
the go-to example, I'm like, okay, let's assume you're not involved in any professional communities somehow. What about a religious community?
Right.
Or what about a neighborhood community? It still becomes about
weekly poker night.
Yeah, like it still becomes about getting to know each other, becoming better versions of ourselves together, which involves learning. Like you can't do it and not learn something. It's impossible.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people would go in saying that's not one of the reasons that they're there, even though that is one of the things that they get out of it.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right.
It's a customer interview problem.
Yeah. So we did a research project with an indie hall and said like, what are the reasons you join and what are the reasons you stay? Yeah. And the learning barely showed up in the top 10.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in a dialogue with somebody, like what happened today? Oh, I met somebody who did this and I learned about this thing. Like people talk about what they learned all the time. But again, in a question, learning barely registers on the map.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. I think we're just not sort of like tuned into that. As
really not.
Ever.
But people also aren't tuned into a lot of the feelings they have throughout the day. I think if you ask them to like synthesize it, for example, most people, I'll be like, email is so awful. Someday I want to just redesign email. And people are like, yeah, I get so much email. I'm like, that's not the problem. And they'll be like, of course it's the problem. And I'll say, well, no. Here's this problem. So I know that Jonathan sent me a file and I don't remember exactly what it was called or when he sent it. So I'm going to search for Jonathan and has attachment. And so I'm going to have to open every single damn file in the list until I find the right one. And if I recognize the file name. There's no other way to find files by Jonathan except by opening this email. Nope, that's not it. Go back, open this email. This is Gmail, so you can't open multiple windows at once. And they're like, oh yeah, I do that. You do that, right?
Of course.
But if I'd said, so what are your struggles with email? Would you have brought that up?
No.
Exactly. No. Because, we're always tuning stuff out. We're like, all right, well, that sucked, and I'm just going to forget about it now.
Right.
Yeah. Or like, this was awesome. People forget about what's awesome stuff too. And if you ask them, well, what did you do today? You might get the information. If you ask, well, why are you here? You might get a different answer.
Yeah. Even in the follow-up survey that people answer 30 minutes after they complete 2 days in a boot camp with us, people have already forgotten what they learned, forgotten what they liked, forgotten what they hated. It's amazing how tough it is to get people to talk about a thing that they literally just did.
It is. I mean, we said like...
I never would have believed this. Like if anyone had told me this before.
These are like some of the smartest
really
people.
Really observant.
Like this is not bottom of the barrel people. These are people that, and we were talking about this the other day, like our expectations are high and we think that's like for all the right reasons. But in things like this, this is not where we have our expectations high. I don't think. And maybe.
Yeah. And we keep trying to, I mean, it's funny that, we keep redesigning our programming, and we keep moving the timing of assessments and feedback and inquiry up and up and up and up and up and up. It's just like the moment ends. But even then, it's like you definitely miss, which comes back to like the point that you guys were making also, which is like the closer to the gold standard is like, like how do you get your observation? Like how do you watch like things happen in the wild and like tune your mindfulness and your awareness and your observation, like in your sort of like note-taking skills to just extract the data without people having to tell you. Because like, but also I think there's a danger to that, right? Too, because, which is the same reason why, in medical studies, that they try and make it like the gold standard is the researchers themselves are actually blind to what's the placebo and what's it, because you come in with a certain desire to want to see a certain outcome in the data. And you're like, a lot of times you're like, you'll either deny or not even aware of that bias, and that will affect You know, it's like the nature of the outcome. So, like, I wonder if there's any way to really, I guess it's just part of like, the challenge of getting clean data on that.
So I don't think that we can get objectivity, like totally. And they find that, even with double-blind studies, sometimes they can't replicate it.
Right.
So it's just, can humans achieve that? I don't know. Can they achieve it when they know what they're looking at? Definitely not. But you can get closer to it.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
we used to, the old class were like, okay, so one part of the class, the old class, the long 3-month email course was, okay, well, you know what you want to do is you want to go out in your communities and just see what people are doing and look for problems that they're having in their posts. And we realized people don't know how to do that. It was obvious to me and obvious to Alex, and they just didn't get it at all. So we spent a lot of time individually coaching them. So when we redid the boot camp, like 30 to 40% at least of 2 days of exercises and videos is specifically on this one skill that I thought was obvious once you heard about it. And so we help people get closer and closer. And one of the things that really helps is we tell them, all right, well, here's a specific forum thread about, I don't know, painting cabinets or something. And you follow the procedures we just showed you how to extract this information. And then we're going to compare. And so when you have the people comparing each other very quickly, that's the kind of rapid feedback mechanism. They can see, oh, wow, you got all of this. I didn't see that at all. And you interpreted that differently than I did. And so that's, it's not objectivity, and it can't be, but it is
it's almost
broader.
Right. Well, it's like picking a jury. Like, there's no such thing as an unbiased jury, but it's like a balance of biases to try and bring you back to closer to neutral.
Right. And there's definitely better juries and worse juries.
There's also an element. There's an element of preparation, right? So getting them ready for it. So we bookend every lesson. So after the lesson, we do this hot seat exercise where people are sharing the results and getting coaching in front of the rest of the group. But before you do the lesson, one of the problems that we realized people were having is they were going into it going,
"Oh, that's easy.
Oh, that's easy.
It looks easy. I don't need to practice it."
Yeah.
So we created a mini exercise that they would do, a 5-minute version of the same thing, and go with as little instruction as possible.
Yeah,
before they actually got the lesson, go try this thing, and they come back and be like, that was really hard. And we're like, yeah, and now you got to learn how to actually do it. And they'd watch that video so intently and go, I never would have thought to do it that way.
Right.
And that
So
that
smart.
gap was creating the gap so that the spark can light.
Yeah.
You can't have a spark without a gap. And so they didn't think, they thought they would look at the lesson and go, that's totally easy. I don't need to practice that. And so we created the gap for them. We showed them the gap that they already had, actually.
Yeah. No, that's genius. I love that.
I'm very manipulative.
Good. All for good.
I'm manipulative for good.
Benevolently manipulative.
But
and
totally,
that's
it's all
okay.
insert. They're paying me to manipulate them in this instance.
Ultimately, what it comes down
It's like
to,
the game.
Like all of this comes down to, remember we had a class that was A, making a lot of money, but B, was taking a lot of time, a lot of energy from us and our students.
We were repeating ourselves all the time in the same class,
killing ourselves, and struggling to help them get results. It wasn't our results. It was they came here for results. We want to make sure they can get the results that they want. And all of the work that went into convincing ourselves that it was the right thing to do to throw away the old class and go back to square one and say, how do we teach them the things they need to get the results in a way that helps them get the results?
Instead of going, the class is about X, and so we're going to include this material and that material.
Right.
It's how do we get them to do it?
Right.
Which was a dramatic change.
Yeah, I would imagine. So you guys are now, you each run your own businesses. You run this project together.
Yep.
You have lives outside of that. So the name of this whole thing is Good Life Project. And I'm always curious, especially with both of you, like when you've got multiple projects, any one of them could take massive amounts of your time, energy, and resources and attention. When you think about that, the notion of balance, how do you feel about that word?
I don't like that word, but it's not because I live a crazy life. I can't even explain my visceral reaction to disliking the word.
I don't like it either, by the way. Just to let you know.
Yeah. So for me, it's like I think balance. I'm gonna try to not answer for you, but let me know if I'm getting close. balance suggests the idea that there's a trade-off.
Yeah.
And I don't think that trade-off actually has to exist. That goes back to the
agree.
beginning of this conversation is people think it's either I work 20 hours a day and my family misses me, so that we can later cash out and make millions of dollars, like whatever the rest of that fantasy is, or I have to stay in this stable job, or those kind of the trade-off mentality.
Totally automate this and do something I don't actually care about, so I can do it as few hours a week as possible.
I think the trade-off mentality is like I certainly don't live it.
No, but the thing is, most people who say that are workaholics.
Right, and that's
And we're
the
not.
risk. Right, that's the risk, right? Because people will choose your workaholics, so blah, blah, blah. Of course you don't believe it. And it's like, no, it's actually not that. It's like, I mean, the fundamental notion, so if we add the words work-life balance to it, which I hate even worse than the word balance, the fundamental assumption under that is that, you have to balance, like life is good, work is bad, which is the reason you have to balance one against the other, rather than, I love what I do. I love how I contribute to the world. It's so seamlessly aligned with the fiber of who I am and who I want to serve and what I want to leave behind and who I love to be with, like during any given day, it's the notion of having a trade-off, the underlying assumption that you have to balance this bad thing with this good thing. It's so foreign.
You said alignment. I think that's really the key. So, my business partner at Indie Hall, has been running, so he also has another business. So we're all people that do more than one thing and live what I think we all consider the lives that we want to.
Yes.
One of the things that Jeff contributes to Indie Hall that I'm so thankful for is the fact that he's not there on a daily basis. So he gets to see things at a bit of a distance, which is really, really, really powerful when you're trying to maintain that alignment. Yeah. And when I say maintain is probably not the right word. It's more of a constant rediscovery of the alignment. Yeah. So one of the things that he does both at his company as well as for our team at Indie Hall, in our little retreats is we do this exercise where we do a little bit of private journaling for 5-10 minutes on a question, and then we share in a group, and then we go to another question, share in a group, back and forth. And the question sequence is, what are your goals and dreams personally? What are your goals and dreams professionally? And what are your goals and dreams for the environment? So in that case, it's like, this might be Indie Hall. It might be your family. It might be your city, whatever it is. And then given that we've journaled about it privately, shared it, sort of maybe realize some things that we hadn't thought of ourselves, from a peer, go, oh, I have that dream too. I forgot about that dream. We forget about our dreams, right?
It's weird, but true.
It's super true. And then we've done this together, and then we launch into sort of a brainstorm of, well, are we like, what do those things have in common? How can we help each other, right, accomplish all three at the same time? Because ultimately, if we're there, it's not balance. We're dead on center. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. But if you don't do that on some sort of regular basis, I think you fall off the horse.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I mean, it's funny.
I'm off the horse. We've never journaled.
We haven't.
It's like note to self, must journal.
Yeah,
Divorce.
But it's like one of the fundamental things. I mean, like the whole stuff that we're working with, we call Aligned Entrepreneurship, and we spend a month on just self-discovery. Because that's the stuff that nobody does in the beginning. It's like, why do you even care in the first place? Beyond who do you want to serve and like where's the need and all this stuff. It's like, how many people do we all, like the three of us know who've built companies where like it started out probably maybe like it was really well aligned with who they were and what they want to do and all this stuff in the beginning, and then starts to drift just because they don't do this, like what you're talking about.
They take whatever comes up in front of them.
Right. And then 3 years later, they're like, well, this is not why I wanted to do this in the beginning.
And then
like, I now hate
over and over.
And then they go back to the beginning and say, it's going to be different this time.
Right, exactly. But they don't change the process.
They don't change, So I've seen that constantly. And,
so often.
Thomas and I set down that path accidentally.
I've done it myself.
Corrected it. So I, until very recently, have been like partially disabled by chronic fatigue type illness, which I got after I got mono for the second time. So like unable to work 40-hour week, sometimes unable to work at all. In fact, for quite a while, unable to work at all. Like couldn't do anything like intellectually demanding at all. It was really bad. And I've only started to get better the past few months, really, like past 6-9 months with thyroid treatment and some other stuff. By the way, if you're tired, cold, losing hair, dry skin, like fatigued, depressed. It could very well be your thyroid, even though the tests are normal. PSA, the more you know. So, because everyone told me I was fine, thyroid-wise. Wrong. So I had to be the most pragmatic person in the world because I literally couldn't do a lot. If I would overexert myself for a day, I would literally have to spend 2 days in bed. Like not because I liked being in bed. I hated it. But so had to make everything I did as efficient as possible. Right. Couldn't be super stressful. I let go of a lot of things that stressed me out. One of the things we let go of, we had hired 2 employees who were a very bad fit for us. Unfortunately, they were friends. So it was very difficult. But I realized that we had to fire them. And so we did that. And Thomas and I had built a second software product, which would have been amazing. But while it was still in private beta, we had a server downtime on a vacation. And Thomas had to get up. We had to go back and he had to fix it. And we had tried partnerships. We had tried hiring people. We had tried contractors. And we were unable to acquire help with it. And so it was going to take over our lives if we had made it public. If we had opened it up to the public and taken on a bunch of customers, it was only going to get worse. Now we had dropped, like in terms of time and cash, like $200,000 in developing this, which was a huge mistake. I did it right the first time with Freckle. And then second product, I lost my sanity and we did it the wrong way. We were working on it for far too long before we let people use it, and we hadn't opened it and all that stuff. If we had done it incrementally, we would have either discovered it much sooner or we would have had a product we could actually live with. So we shut that down. And that was October, 2 years ago now? Yeah. It was October 2 years ago. So we did this all together. And so decided from then on never to make that mistake again. Because it is something you can recover from if you will catch it and are willing to do it. And it really, 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 really sucked. But
what was amazing though was, I think Amy and Thomas did an incredible job of shutting this down really gracefully. The communication was clear and honest and
ended up on Hacker News
and apologetic in the right way. I think that there's a careful way to be apologetic about that thing, but at the heart of it was, this, we're not going to be able to do this. Ended up on Hacker News, and the backlash. And again, this goes back to that fantasy.
I remember the backlash actually.
People insisting that there must have been something else going on.
There were conspiracy theorists. I just laid out the technical and human and business problems to you right now, and that was them. And I put that in the email to our customers, and the customers were great about it. They were very understanding.
Right.
We refunded their money, and we gave them plenty of time, offered to help get their data off. Which they understood, and.
But I think just a lot of people could not conceive of the notion
shutting
of having
down
the potential.
Something that was making money. They could put all this money in. There had to be a conspiracy,
right?
Or we were incompetent.
Yeah, no, I mean it's like that because as you're saying, I'm remembering actually what happened on Hacker News, and I remember reading it and being like, no, I should get that, but then seeing it was so hard for people to fathom.
Right.
What was really driving it and why it was actually the right choice for you.
Right.
And maybe not for them.
Right.
But you're not
Absolutely.
them.
Exactly.
They want to transpose their values in their life into you. And it's it doesn't work that way.
But you think about it, that the way that you treat others is the way that you treat yourself. No. So I think a lot of these people, had they been in our position, would have just kept punishing themselves and not done what was better for them and for their customers.
Yeah, no doubt.
Which is interesting. And I think this is how it happens, right? You're like, well, I have to do this because I put all this money in, or I have to do this because it's making money.
Right.
And that's how people take something that they love and end up in a place that they hate.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm not going to lie, it was really terrible. And I may have spent a month in bed, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I didn't have any energy left at that point. I'd spent all my emotional energy on it, but it was something we were able to recover from, and we protected the business and the life that we had.
Right. And now, moving forward.
Yes. I learned a really hard lesson.
Yeah. But also, your life from this point forward is so much.
Yeah, if we had not done it.
Better.
I mean, I have friends who run bootstrapped infrastructure businesses, and they really love it. Yeah. But I look at them, and they sometimes have to, leave a dinner party or whatever to fix something. I'm like, I don't want to be that way. I can't. It would stress me out too much. You have to know what makes you happy, why you're doing it, as you were saying, but also your limits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if I offer the term out to you both, to live a good life, what bubbles up as like, what's the heartbeat of that for each of you?
Time with people that I care about and enjoy, is probably the biggest one. And like that, there's a whole lot to unpack in that. Yeah. And you know, that's both the people that I work with, people in the family, friends, loved ones, whatever it might be. But however I've designed my life, you know, for me, all of my work is an excuse to work with a person that I want to work with. So that's Amy.
Whether it's a customer
whether it's a business partner or a customer. Like it's all like the work is in many cases an excuse to spend time with a certain person or type of person.
Yeah.
And then outside of work, the things that work allows me to do, affords me the time to do, the freedom to do, the flexibility to do, and to help other people do.
Yeah.
I'm going to cop out and say that. So for me, it's absolutely the people, and it wasn't always that way. So when I moved to Austria to be with my Austrian husband, I moved and we got married right away in 2008. I was moving from Maryland where I didn't really have a lot of ties. I just thought that was just the way that things were. And then Austria was almost impossible for me to make friends. Austrians don't like new people and they don't like outsiders. And I thought it was me specifically. Like I'm American, or, you know, I'm overweight, or I'm loud and I say things like entreporn and I curse a lot and stuff. And my German wasn't awesome. But actually then I heard from people who moved to Vienna from outside of Vienna in Austria that they had very similar problems. And being deprived that way and then getting sick and like having to give up a lot of things that I thought were so important to me, and going through this illness of being basically disabled and unable to do anything that I had valued about myself for so long, that made me realize what's really important. And it's people. So when I had that final realization, I was like, screw it, we're moving to Philadelphia. And Thomas is like, my husband is like, yeah, let's do it. And so we moved to Philadelphia, where I'd never lived before, because of the indie hall community. Because here were people who wanted us to be around, who were, you know, happy with what they were doing, but always striving to do better. There's two different types of striving, right? There's the striving where you denigrate yourself and tell her, well, you just suck. This isn't good enough. You have to try harder. And there's like, I like what I have, and wouldn't it be fun if it was even better? Yeah. That's what I like. So that has improved my life so much, to have people to hang out with, you know, who are close, not just, you know, I am friends. And, if I had to give my business up to keep that, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Powerful. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Sorry about all the cursing.
No, trust me, you haven't come close to our record.
Oh, good. You're saying it's actually try harder.
You guys are they're like, please, you guys are tame. No, it's been so much fun. So my guests today on this episode are Amy Hoy and Alex Hillman. Jonathan Fields signing off for Good Life Project.